Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto changed himself after the death of Haku Part 1 Naruto X. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The mission to Wave Country. That was the beginning of a tale that would be told for generations, the start of a legend. However, what if that mission had ended a little differently? How much would it change? Better yet, would it be for the better, or for worse? Only time would tell. The battle between Naruto, Sasuke and Zabuza's apprentice was not going well for the rookie genin. The masked missing nin was playing around with them at this point, launching Senbon after Senbon at the two young ninja. Sasuke, being unable to melt the mirrors and having just awakened the Sharingan, was trying his hardest to use Naruto's clones as a way of blindsiding the masked ninja. Naruto, in his typical fashion, just churned out clone after clone, hoping that it would get him somewhere. Suffice it to say, it really wasn't. However, Sasuke was doing his best in an otherwise terrible situation and was getting closer and closer with his uses of the Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu, by using the Sharingan's time-slowing capabilities to track the ninja's assaults. Having noticed this, the masked ninja made a decision. Take the bait out of play. The bait, being Naruto and his endless supply of clones, was the obvious choice for turning this battle around. Without the clones, Sasuke's leverage of the situation disappears. But instead of Naruto, Sasuke is taken down. This drives Naruto, in a fit of rage and sadness of losing his first friend, to call upon the power of his tenant, the Kyuubi. He makes quick work of the masked ninja after giving basically everyone a heart attack by releasing the malevolent chakra of the Kyuubi. After punching the masked ninja through the mirrors, Naruto goes for a finishing blow. However, something happens that he does not expect. The mask had fallen away after the blow, showing him none other than Haku, the boy he met in the woods not too long ago. This time around, however, he cannot stop his attack fully, his momentum too high and his surprise clouding his mind, so he strikes the boy with the least amount of force that he could, which knocks the boy out. He simply stares at the boy, wide-eyed. But, why were you so nice that day? Naruto said quietly to himself as he tried to come to terms with what was happening. Then he begins to hear the sound of chirping birds, and looks over to see Zabuza pinned by a squad of dogs. While his teacher, Kakashi Hatake, the copy ninja, is holding a mass of writhing electricity in his palm. This was his signature jutsu. The Reikiri lightning cutter. Your future is death, Kakashi said, before running at Zabuza and impaling his hand through his heart. Zabuza's eyes widened and he let out a cry of pain before falling silent, the dogs immediately releasing him and poofing away. That was disgusting, Naruto thought while trying not to throw up. Who could blame him? His teacher's hand was in the guy's chest. Immediately clapping was heard, all eyes turned to see Gato and his army of thugs simply looking on at the ninja's fight. Well, I guess the great demon of the mist isn't so great after all, Gato said smugly. Good, wasn't planning on paying the guy anyway, this just makes everything easier for me. At this everyone present narrowed their eyes, except Tazuna, who looked a little worried. However, his thugs didn't get chance to attack, as a crossbow bolt landed in front of them. Everyone turned to see Inari and the villagers at the other end of the bridge, armed with whatever weapons they could find. Naruto smirked at this. Seems the kid has courage after all. Naruto then proceeded to make an army of clones while Kakashi readied himself for another fight. It was a very disappointing fight. Gato's men fought like brainless fools, expecting the first slice to end it all. This made it rather easy for the ninja, who simply knocked them all out while Kakashi killed Gato with another Reikiri, and with him gone, Wave's freedom was returned. The Konoha shinobi promptly made their way back to Tazuna's house. Sakura was able to wake up Sasuke, showing the enemy ninja had not actually killed him. They then bound said ninja in rope and took him with them. They then all had a well-deserved rest while the young blonde contemplated the events of the day. Was everything we spoke about in the woods just an act so that he could find out about my team, or was he planning on quickly getting rid of me if he had the chance? Or maybe, he was sincere. These weren't the only thoughts going through the blonde's head. He was known to be a little dumb, but he wasn't a complete moron, his brain was indeed functional. So they all slept the day off, knowing that tomorrow they would have to deal with the building of the bridge again, along with having a little chat with their guest. Naruto, however, wanted this more than the rest of them for reasons they were not aware. I will figure out if he was sincere, no matter what it takes. These were his last thoughts before he nodded off to sweet, sweet sleep. The next day, everyone awoke feeling a little stiff. The enemy ninja was still unconscious, so they all decided to have a nice morning before the less pleasant activity of the day began. Interrogation never was a fun job. Somewhere in Konoha, a very scarred man felt the need to knock some sense into someone for reasons he didn't understand. Naruto made his way into the kitchen and saw Tsunami making breakfast and smiled. She was such a kind-hearted person, not like the Konoha population. No need to be bitter, let's just enjoy the time we have here, he thought a little glumly. Good morning, Naruto said cheerfully, as Tsunami turned to him. Ah, good morning to you too, Naruto. How was your rest? She replied with a smile. Naruto yawned a little before answering. It was great. After all that action yesterday, it felt great to just rest, you know. He then saw his teammates at the table along with his sensei. So his thoughts returned to their prisoner, but he'd deal with that after breakfast. After a nice quiet morning, Naruto finally piped up. So Kakashi-sensei, what are we gonna do about that guy? He asked with a small frown, not liking the possibility that his new friend could have been playing him for a fool. Well, Naruto, Kakashi began, we don't really have to do anything, I suppose. He isn't technically our enemy anymore, but we need to ensure that he won't go into a rage over Zabuza's death, so we need to play this carefully. He finished with a very business-like attitude that the rookies were a bit taken aback by. Kakashi could be serious. Fair enough, sensei, he replied, while Sasuke started to grin a little. Maybe he could test some Sharingan genjutsu on their prisoner. Kakashi, Sasuke began, if we need to interrogate the guy, I want to try out my Sharingan on him. Meanwhile, Kakashi simply sighed. Sasuke couldn't just stay out of it, could he? Sasuke, simply awakening the Sharingan doesn't mean you have access to all its powers, give yourself chance to train it a little, nay. He replied, while Sasuke simply scowled and went back to his brooding, while Sakura fawning over him. I really need to train that out of them, thought Kakashi with hidden exasperation. Naruto then turned to address Sasuke about his death, thinking it best to be honest rather than continuing their silly feud. Hey Sasuke, he said, to which Sasuke looked at him with a single brow raised. Naruto took this as a sign to continue. I'm glad you weren't killed on the bridge. We may not act it, but I do think of you as a friend. He said a little nervously. During the mission the two had seemed to become closer, but neither went as far as to mention friendship to the other. He was a little worried Sasuke would just scoff and call him a dobi. Like that guy could kill me, dobi, he said, to which Naruto simply lowered his head. Sasuke, however, was simply using this bravado to ease into the more unfamiliar thing he was about to be. Nice-ish. But, thank you, Naruto, he said, having to grit his teeth to say Naruto instead of dobi. Naruto immediately cheered up at this. Maybe it was a sign that the day would end well. Sakura couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't hate Naruto anymore, but she was shocked Sasuke could be so nice. Hell, the guy barely spoke to either of them. Maybe they required a trial by fire to kickstart their friendship. A trial by fire she wasn't a part of. She sighed, wondering when she could get the attention of her Sasuke-kun. She would need to be there next time. Maybe she should train a little. Naruto decided to address his other teammate. So Sakura, how are you doing about this? Seeing death isn't easy. I almost threw up seeing Kakashi kill Zabuza. He said. She simply looked at him and blinked. He could speak to her without being annoying. Nah, he was probably deep in thought about seeing that boy again, since he'd told them they'd met once before. Kakashi then scolded him about not telling them, but honestly, could they blame him? The guy was so normal in the forest. Not to mention Naruto was a rookie genin, he'd hardly notice something so well hidden. Well, I'm doing okay, I guess. I don't think I'll sleep right for a while though, that was a pretty exhausting day. She said. Then she remembered something very important. Naruto, she said with a hint of fear. What? What was that power you used on the bridge? She said with apprehension. Naruto raised an eyebrow, until he remembered what they were talking about. He was trying his hardest to come up with an excuse. Kakashi was mentally leaping at the friendly interaction of his team. Alas, all good things must come to an end, and when the Kyuubi came to attention, it was usually that time. So he needed to cut this short. How about we pay our little guest a visit, nay? He said quickly, not giving anyone chance to say no. All the genin walked with him, but Sakura made a mental note to continue this at some point. Later that day, Haku was not having a good time. No, first the blonde boy goes into a fit of rage and releases unbelievably powerful, and evil, red chakra and beats him outright. Then he was knocked out. He had no idea what happened to Zabuza or if he was even alive. Not to mention he was a prisoner. Who knows what they planned to do to him? Then his heart sank. What if Zabuza was dead? What could he do without his master? He was never made to do anything himself. The only serious decision he ever made was to go with Zabuza, and now that he was dead, he had no purpose. Maybe I can just get them to kill me and get it over with. He thought sadly. Though, all this time alone in the room gave him plenty of time to think about things, which made him think, do I need to die? I have freedom now, freedom to do as I wish. Can I really put that as a positive though? I've never had complete freedom, I don't know what to do. Haku thought, as his thoughts trailed back to the blonde boy he met in the forest a few days before the Battle of the Bridge, the one responsible for him being taken out of the fight. He sighed. What would Naruto think of him after he tried to kill him and his friend, the Uchiha? Haku legitimately liked the boy since he was honest and had a very positive goal, despite all the sadness and loneliness he saw in the blonde's eyes. In a way, they were the same, it seemed. His musing were finally stopped when the entirety of Team 7 entered the room with various expressions. Kakashi seemed neutral. Sakura was a little fearful of the one who could defeat her Sasuke-kun, and Sasuke was brooding. However, it was the blonde's expression which truly made him upset. He looked betrayed, hurt by the fact that the one he spoke with so casually was actually someone who was planning to kill them. Though he couldn't help but think about the way Sasuke was spared, despite everything. This brought a little hope to his clouded mind. The silence was palpable, which Kakashi decided was enough and began to speak. So, let's talk, shall we? His only response was Haku looking up at him and inclining his head slightly. Alright then, let's start with names. My name is Kakashi Hatake, and you are? He spoke cheerfully, despite the fact that this was, for all intents and purposes, an interrogation. My name is Haku Yuki. I am the last of the Yuki clan. He spoke with little emotion, something Kakashi could easily connect to the fact that Zabuza was dead. Well, I didn't ask about your clan status, but I'm pleased you're being so cooperative. He said. Now then, since your friend Zabuza is dead, what do you intend to do? We can't actually accuse you of anything other than assault since you are neither a missing nin nor have you killed anyone. He continued in a serious voice. I don't know. Zabuza's goals were my life. I am little more than a broken tool. He said sadly, looking crestfallen, with a few tears welling up at the confirmation on his master's death. Then he began to cry. Team 7 gave him some time to calm down before continuing. Well, they would have, if Naruto wasn't there. Naruto couldn't take the way he thought of himself and decided it was his time to get involved. What do you mean just a tool? You are a ninja, a human being. If that's all that guy thought of you as, then there was no point of helping the jerk. He said with anger leaking out. Haku, hearing this, let out a small laugh, though it was more bitter than cheerful. That may be, but what would you do if you had only one precious person? Would you do anything to help them, to get them to achieve their dreams? That was exactly what my goal was for Zabuza-sama. He replied, again almost emotionless. Kakashi decided to butt in before Naruto threw a tantrum. Alright, well, that's good and all, but we still don't know if you are safe to release. So until the bridge is complete, you will be our guest, so to speak. After that, you can do as you please, since you clearly were just following orders. Kakashi spoke, knowing that everything said was true by examining the conversation with his Sharingan. The other two members of Team 7 were surprisingly indifferent. Sasuke was disappointed he couldn't use his dojutsu to interrogate the guy, while Sakura was silently fawning. If that is what must be done, so be it. Haku spoke with finality. Kakashi nodded at this, slightly glad the boy was so broken since it made his job here so much easier. He then untied Haku and allowed him to go and clean himself of all the filth accumulated during the fight. After a while, he emerged and went downstairs. Tazuna's family, not realizing what went on during the boy and Team 7, had a silent heart attack thinking he was going to finish what Zabuza started, but were surprised when he silently sat down and did nothing. Oh, and I mean nothing, he sat there near motionless. Like a statue. A creepy, mentally broken statue. This was the site Naruto arrived to after coming back from some light training with tree climbing, since he was trying to further hone his chakra control. Seeing Haku in this state made it easier to approach the boy, since he knew how loneliness felt. He sat down next to boy and took a few moments to compose his thought, not wanted to get upset over potentially nothing. So, he began, was any of it real? Was our conversation just a convenient lie to get away without making me see who you really were? He said softly, not really wanting the answer, but steeling himself for it when it came. Yes, it was. I could see we were the same. I saw it in your eyes, the loneliness and the pain, and it made me happy to see another who had shared those feelings, so I couldn't help but interact with you. Haku replied. Naruto let out a genuine smile at this. He was thrilled that the boy hadn't just been lying to him. That's a relief. I was afraid you were just lying to me or something. So what are you going to do when we finish the bridge? You can't exactly just wander. It's not really safe to do that. Naruto replied, never losing his smile. I still don't know. I have never really made my own decisions, Naruto. I have been following Zabuza-sama's orders to the letter my whole life since the incident, Haku said, flinching slightly at the last part. Bringing up his past was never the easiest thing for him. He had major family issues. Do you want to talk about it? Naruto replied nervously. He didn't exactly want to drive the boy away by bringing up a topic he didn't want to discuss, but his curiosity got the better of him. Haku thought about this for a second, weighing the options. I think I should talk about this, to finally let it go. He thought. Why? Yes. However, could we speak somewhere more private? This isn't easy to speak about. He said, clearly apprehensive about doing so. That's fine, Haku. Let's go up into the room. Naruto replied softly. He wasn't exactly clever, but if there was one thing he understood, it was a painful past experience. Hell, he had a pretty damn good chance of beating most sob stories. Thank you. Lead the way. Haku stated. Naruto nodded, leading him upstairs and into his temporary sleeping quarters. They then sat down in an uncomfortable silence while Haku mentally prepared himself for the story he was about to tell for the first time. He didn't even bother telling it to Zabuza, knowing his past meant little to the man. My Ka-san was a member of the Yuki clan, like I was. However, in Water Country, the current Mizukage declared Kekkei Genkai, bloodline limits, to be impure, or evil. I can't remember the specifics of why he did it, but he did. Maika-san didn't want to be killed for something she had no control over, so she kept it hidden, never showing it to the world. After a while she met my father and settled down with him, eventually leading to my birth. He recalled happily. This was the good part of her early life, so she had no issue telling this part. My early life was very good. Maika-san and Tu-san were nice people. We weren't rich or anything, but we could live comfortably. However, that all changed when I awoke my Kekkei Genkai. Haku said. Naruto could immediately tell where this was going and so steeled himself for the tragic end. I used my Hyoten powers carelessly. I wasn't even aware it was a Kekkei Genkai. At that age I knew little about the shinobi world. Maika-san saw that and slapped me across the face, something she never did unless it was extremely serious. She yelled at me never to use it again, but my Tu-san saw everything. He continued, barely containing his anguish. My Tu-san, he killed my Ka-san, something to do with demonic bloodlines or something. I wasn't really listening, I was far too afraid. He came at me with tears running down his face. I don't think he really wanted to do it. He was likely told by his friends that they'd report his family. So I did the only thing I could, unconsciously channeling my Hyoten powers in. I killed everyone in the house. I had no choice. He said, no longer containing the tears. Naruto couldn't help but hug the poor boy. He noticed something though. Haku's chest did not seem like something a guy should have. Oh my god, he's a she. He exclaimed mentally. Though honestly he was cheering, glad that he wasn't hugging a guy. He could bring this up after the boy, no girl, finished her story. So then, I just went away, scrounging food wherever I could and just trying to stay alive. Then when I had sat down of a bridge one day, a masked ninja came up to me. He offered me a place at his side, as a tool. That man was Zabuza-sama. From then on I simply did as he required and helped him however I could. I had a purpose. Then this all happened. Now I have nobody again. She finished crying again. Naruto couldn't help but comfort the girl. It's all right, Haku. If you want, I'll be your precious person. I'll be your friend. He replied soothingly. Haku could do little but widen her eyes. I tried to harm his friends in the bridge building. I tried to break his will within the mirrors. I did all that and he wants to be my friend. She thought, frantically trying to make sense of this. What? You want to be my friend? After a quick nod, she couldn't hold back her confusion. Why? She all but screamed. I've done nothing but harm your team since you got here. I attacked your friend, the Uchiha. I could have killed him, and allowed the death of your sensei and your other teammate. She said. Naruto just smiled up at her though, since she had risen to her feet in her rant. That's not true. Did Zabuza make you speak to me in the forest? Did Zabuza tell you to take non-lethal shots on Sasuke? That was all you, Haku. You are a good person with an unhappy life. She couldn't hold back the tears with these words, jumping at him and hugging him fiercely. Thank you, she repeated like a manta. Naruto was happy that she was comfortable enough around him to run her emotions like she was. Then again, the topic isn't exactly easy to speak about. You're welcome, Haku-chan, he said unconsciously. Then both he and Haku realized what she said and she jumped back with a cute eep. And looked at him with a small blush while covering her mouth. Wah, what did you say? She spoke slightly nervous. She wasn't expecting such a term of affection. Wait a minute, that was the female term. She exclaimed mentally. Did he know? Her eyes widened for a moment before returning to normal. Why should I care? I have no orders to hide it anymore. She thought happily while a small smile formed. Never mind, she said. Thank you again, Naruto-kun. She said somewhat nervously. She didn't know how he'd react to being called that. All fears were erased when a huge smile greeted her words and he just sat there looking in her direction. No problem, Haku-chan. He spoke cheerfully. Haku simply returned the smile and they went back downstairs, unknowing of what just began. A legendary partnership had been started. After the bridge's completion, the rest of the week went smoothly. The team, along with Haku, who was surprisingly cheery, guarded Tazuna and his men while they constructed the bridge. It wasn't really like they needed to, but it made the village feel safer having its heroes overlooking them. They had no issue guarding the bridge since it was an excuse to do nothing for the rest of the week. Naruto and the girl had gotten a little closer over the week, since due to the fact Sasuke would still brood and train while Sakura fawned and did little else. Naruto didn't really have anyone to talk to but Kakashi, and his sensei still scared him a little after the fiasco with his Reikiri. Haku and Naruto just chatted a little and got to know the other a little. The week did wonders to cure Haku's sadness over losing Zabuza. She was now aware what the man never offered her. She never felt wanted with him, but now she was beginning to understand how it felt again. Now that the bridge was done, Team 7, Haku and the villagers were standing at its end. Team 7 was preparing to return to the Leaf Village and the villagers of the town were seeing them off. There was one other matter of business left, however. Kakashi felt it necessary to sort it out as quick as possible. So Haku, what do you intend to do now? He spoke seriously, his tone commanding respect. Again, the genin gaped at their teacher not being a silly, perverted time waster. Haku sighed, she was dreading this. Before she could speak, however, Naruto spoke with a loud and happy tone. She's coming to the Leaf with us, of course. He said. Team 7 were surprised by this, but mostly by the word, she. He'd neglected to mention that little development, of course. Kakashi, coming out of his stupor, decided to clear this up. What do you mean she's coming with us? More importantly, what do you mean by she? He said. Naruto blinked multiple times before realizing he hadn't said anything and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Oops, forgot to mention that, did I? He said, earning nods all around. And obviously I said she's coming with us because she is. Right, Haku-chan? He said. Looking at the newly discovered girl, they could all tell she was in an internal struggle, except Naruto, being oblivious as he is, and all waited for her answer. Well, she said. What if they hate me for my Kekkei Genkai there? What if I'm treated like an outcast again? Her thoughts raged on before she composed herself and continued. Would they hate me there? She said meekly. Naruto was a little confused and decided to put his questions to rest. Why would they hate you? It isn't like you're a. Oh, he said, remembering her childhood. They wouldn't hate you, Haku-chan. Konoha loves Kekkei Genkai. It would be the opposite of Mizu no Kuni, land of water, I promise. He said calmly, not needing to explain what happened to her to his team since Kakashi pieced it together immediately. Haku still looked unsure but decided nothing could come from inaction. Okay, I'll go to the Leaf Village with you, she said with a small smile. That in turn caused Naruto to smile, not going unnoticed by Kakashi. He simply decided to ask about it later though, and they went on their way. Near the Leaf Village, the travel from Wave to the Leaf Village was peaceful. Serene, even. It was mostly a silent trip, but not uncomfortable. Haku was thrilled and frightened at the same time at the prospect of living in the Leaf. Naruto was ecstatic about his new friend coming with them, Kakashi was enjoying his book, Sasuke was enjoying his brooding, and Sakura was fawning over said Uchiha. All in all, it was a pretty nice trip. Near the Leaf Village, Haku decided to break the silence. So what's the village like anyways? She said calmly. Kakashi decided to answer before Naruto could get into a rant. Oh, it's a very lively village, not like the other great villages. It's always calm with a happy air around it. You'll probably love it, he said, but finished with another sentence in his mind. If the Sandaime lets you in, that is. Oh, who am I kidding? Naruto will vouch for her and the Sandaime can't turn Naruto down. He thought with a small chuckle. They finally arrived at the village gates and they all just waited for Haku to finish taking in the sights when Naruto said. Welcome to the Leaf, Haku-chan. Welcome to the Leaf, Haku-chan, said the energetic blonde of the group. Haku, however, didn't really hear him, too enthralled with the sight of the village. It was nothing like Haku was used to. She had never been in a major village. It was completely alien to her. In a good way. She smiled and focused back on the group who seemed curious what her reaction would be. It's wonderful, she said, getting smiles from Team 7 and a slight grin from Sasuke, who is much too cool to smile. Then Kakashi decided to get the ball rolling since they had been standing just outside the gates for a little while now, they probably looked a little odd to passers-by. Let's actually go into the village then, shall we? He said, earning nods from the rookies and Haku. They walked into the village and went up to the reception desk, home of Kotetsu and Izumo, the eternal Chunin. Kakashi decided to sign them in. Team 7 and Junin instructor Kakashi Hatake returning from a mission along with a guest who would like to request housing within the village. He said almost like clockwork. The genin found this a little weird. Didn't they know who they were? They were there when they left the village. Haku wasn't really paying attention to Kakashi, she was too busy trying to perceive how her life would be in the village. Oh hey Kakashi, Izumo started, before turning more professional. How did the mission go? Just the regular C rank, right? He continued, despite knowing that picking up a guest didn't usually happen on normal C ranks. Kakashi grinned under his mask. This story would probably never get old. He could already see it, all the other jonin standing there shocked while he inwardly laughs at their expressions. Well, if you call running into Zabuza Momochi and the Demon Brothers a regular C rank then sure. He said smiling. Izumo's jaw hit the floor with this while Kotetsu swung his head around to face them, interest newly found after his proclamation. They couldn't believe their ears. 3 genin and their jonin sensei fought the Zabuza Momochi. What? Kotetsu shouted in surprise. Why the hell would you let fresh genin fight an A- rank missing nin? He continued. Izumo just nodded, still shell-shocked, while Kakashi was trying his hardest not to laugh their reactions. The genin weren't so strongly willed however and broke down laughing. Well, Naruto and Sakura did. Haku let out a few giggles while Sasuke, being the killjoy he is, was simply tapping his foot, wondering why this was taking so long. Seeing that he'd had enough fun, Kakashi decided to end their little charade. Well, by the time we ran into Zabuza we were already in wave. Not to mention pulling back would have undoubtedly led to the death of our client. We didn't have any real method to contact the village for reinforcements at that point. Besides, I took care of Zabuza while my genin took on his associate, I'm not that irresponsible. He said with a pout. Izumo and Kotetsu didn't quite buy it but decided to leave it there. Whatever you say Kakashi, Kotetsu said. Oh, who was his associate by the way? He would have to be pretty tough for Zabuza to bother taking him along. He finished. Haku eyebrows twitched at this. Did she have to be a male to be taken seriously? She was starting to dislike Kotetsu. Kakashi smirked, knowing this would get a good reaction too. Oh, nobody special. Just that girl over there is all. He said pointing at Haku, who was a little nervous being the center of attention. Izumo gaped while Kotetsu just raised an eyebrow. I was being serious Kakashi. He replied. Again Haku wasn't happy about this and decided to put his skepticism to rest. Blurring past Kakashi, Haku appeared behind Kotetsu with a senbon to his neck. He started to swear at this, having clearly annoyed the girl. A girl who spent a lot of time around Zabuza. He was so dead. Oh I'm sorry, am I not scary enough for you? Maybe it's because my mask is gone. She said coldly, making the man sweat even more while Naruto looked a little sheepish, since he was the one who broke said mask. Izumo and the genin were rather surprised by this action while Kakashi decided to ease the tension. Alright Haku, no need to scare the man to death. We still need to see the Hokage and I get the feeling your chances of getting into the village will severely decline if you kill one of our gatekeepers. He said seriously. Haku nodded and blurred back to Naruto's side. Nice one, he said. Haku smiled at this and went back to her thoughts. Well if that's all we'll be going to see the Hokage now. Kakashi said, resulting in nods from the 2 chunin. They then started leaving while Azuma whispered to Kotetsu. "You are so lucky Kakashi was here," he said, to which Kotetsu gulped, not wanting to see what Haku could do. At the Hokage's office. Upon arriving at the Hokage Tower, Haku briefly studied the building before being pulled along by a grinning Naruto. Then they saw the Hokage's secretary who promptly ushered them in while going back to her duties. Whatever those were. They entered the room to see an elderly man with spiky white hair sat at a long ornate wooden desk. This man was the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The man known as the Professor. He was battling an indomitable horde of man's worst enemy. Oh yes, that's right. He was dealing with paperwork. Damn it all, it never ends, he said with obvious frustration. Then he spotted Team 7 at his door along with someone he didn't recognize and immediately went into Hokage mode. He turned to Kakashi who immediately straightened under the old man's wizened gaze. "Report," he said passively. Kakashi nodded and gave him his written report, hoping he could escape without a serious case of scolding. Alas, he was too busy thinking about this and gave the Hokage plenty of time to skim through the important details before releasing a pretty hefty dosage of ki, or killing intent, on the masked Junin. "You took a genin team on what was essentially an A-ranked mission," he said angrily, making the Junin shrink under the intensity of his anger. He quickly composed himself, finding a way to pass off the blame to someone else. "Or should I say, 3 other people. They requested we continue the mission Sandame-sama." He spoke quickly while receiving glares from the young genin. "Sell out," they thought. The Hokage rolled his eyes at this. Did he really think that would work? "Oh, I wasn't aware these genin were in charge of the team Kakashi. Must be my mistake," he said sarcastically before sighing and continuing. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order for you 3. An A-ranked mission without dying at your age is rather remarkable," he said kindly, entering the grandfather figure mode. "Hi, Hokage-sama. Thanks Gigi," said the genin, 2 of whom then looked at a certain blonde incredulously. He couldn't get away with calling the Hokage that, right? However, the man just smiled at them and continued. "Well, this will be recorded as an A-rank and you will be paid accordingly. Now, is there anything else?" he said looking straight at Haku. She steeled her nerves and decided to speak up. "Hi Hokage-sama. I would like to request to join the village as a shinobi of the leaf," she said seriously. The Hokage raised an eyebrow at this. He did just read the report, so he was aware of who the girl was, but he was expecting her to be a prisoner or something. Kakashi really needed to detail his reports more. "Oh, why should I allow this? Have you anything to offer the village?" he spoke, feigning ignorance of who she was. Haku nodded at this. She figured it would be better to be truthful. "Hi, I am the last known individual with the Hyoten Kekkei Genkei. I am proficient with both my bloodline and Suiten ninjutsu. I have the bare minimum of knowledge regarding Futon ninjutsu in order to use my Kekkei Genkei. I have also received training from Zabuza Momochi," she said, ending with her head down. This was the defining moment. If the man was as smart as they say, he'd know where they found her and would make a decision now. "I see," he said. "That is a very impressive skill set you have there. However, why should I allow you entry to the village after assisting the attempted murder of Team 7 and their client?" He spoke, not revealing what he was truly feeling, though he was very experienced, so it came naturally. Haku was feeling the pressure of the situation and was starting to falter. She was about to reply when a certain blonde decided to save her the trouble. Gigi, she was just following Zabuza's orders. Without him she has no reason to do anything bad, not to mention it shows she can follow orders well if she did that without wanting to. The blonde said defensively. Haku merely looked at him with a smile. He was so kind to her despite everything. The Hokage, despite all his experience and self-control, simply couldn't stop a smile from breaking out across his weary face. "Well, I'll keep that in mind, Naruto-kun, but I'd like to hear it from Haku," he said. Honestly, he'd already made his decision, but for appearance's sake he'd wait until she answered. So Haku decided to finish her argument. I was indeed loyal to Zabuza-sama, and honestly, if he was still alive, I would still be your enemy. However, with him gone, I have no grudge against you. In fact, I am actually quite fond of this village thus far, and Naruto-kun has become one of my precious people. She spoke seriously. She was silently cheering that she didn't stutter or let out an hint of fear. Kakashi and the Sandaime picked up on the way she referred to Naruto, along with the fact she openly admitted she thought he was precious to her. Kakashi thought this would be great teasing material in the future, while the Sandaime was happy that Naruto finally found a girl who liked him. Not that the idiot realized what was really going on, of course. Hell, even Haku didn't make the connection. All right then. If I allow you entry as a ninja of Konoha, I have a few conditions. Do you have any issues with that? He asked. Getting a quick no in response, he continued. Firstly, you will not be able to leave the village for a month. He said. Seeing no argument, he continued. Secondly, you will be joining Team 7 during their training sessions, but you will not be on their missions. He said. Again, seeing no argument. It was the opposite, in fact. She seemed pleased. Lastly, you will be inducted as a genin and must raise through the ranks like everyone else, understood? He finished, getting a nod and nothing else. He then smiled and got onto a more cheery topic. Then from this day forward, you Haku are a shinobi of Konoha. He said, holding out a headband. Haku smiled and was thrilled that she wouldn't be sent away. Naruto was ecstatic that she could stay and he could spend more time with her, and Kakashi and the rookies looked pleased. She was a nice girl once you got past the attempted murder. Hiruzen decided to finish this up. Now, if that is all, I must request you all leave. Naruto, I will speak you soon, I'm sure. He said. They all turned to leave when the air grew cold. Oh, and Kakashi, I expect you back later for a chat about your teaching style. He said in a tone that promised either pain or a massive chewing out. He sighed and left the room. Haku, the Sandaime called, to which she turned and walked back to the man. I don't suppose you have somewhere to stay, do you? I can't exactly have you sleeping outside now, can I? He said. She blinked. Where was she going to stay? Maybe they'd give her temporary housing. No, I don't, she said neutrally. The Sandaime sighed. Arranging temporary housing was always a pain in the ass. The apartment complex owners would argue with him for ages to stop from having to give an apartment for free. Naruto, who was waiting at the door, looked up at this. You could stay with me. He blurted out without thinking. Then he blinked repeatedly, realizing what he said. Why did I say that? When she sees the state of my apartment, she'll think I'm some sort of lazy slob. He thought. The Sandaime smirked playfully. Well, Naruto-kun, while I'm sure she appreciates the offer, your apartment is not made for multiple people. I'll sort out the housing. Come back in an hour or two, Haku, and I'm sure I'll have something for you. He said. Haku, who had blushed at the concept of living with Naruto, for reasons she didn't understand, settled down at this and nodded. Thank you, Hokage-sama, she said. He nodded and sent them out. Then after a few minutes he spoke, seemingly to himself, loudly. Anbu, bring me Kakashi, he shouted, making the shadows of the room flicker about before disappearing. He sighed and leaned back. I'm too old for this shit, he thought achingly. With Team 7 and Haku. Alright, my cute little genin, congratulations on your first A-ranked mission. I wasn't expecting to say this so soon, but it brings me nothing but pride to say so. He said happily with a trademarked eye smile. Team 7 smiled at this before Kakashi continued. All right, have a good rest tonight and meet me at training ground 7 and 0600. He said before the Anbu appeared and whispered something to make him pale and promptly shunshin away. Huh, I wonder what that was about. Naruto said. Sasuke rolled his eyes at this and decided to get his daily insult to the stupid blonde in. Isn't it obvious? The Anbu work for the Hokage, and he seemed pretty mad earlier when he asked Kakashi to come back later. You're such an idiot, Dobi, he said with a smirk. Naruto was about to retort when Haku put a hand on his shoulder and shook her head. He conceded to this and simply decided to ignore the prideful Uchiha. Sakura decided to throw in her own little comment. So Sasuke-kun, you wanna go get a bite to eat or something? She said suggestively. Sasuke snorted at this, but honestly he was considering it, but not alone with Sakura. He'd end up killing himself or something. You wanna come Dobi? He said casually. Naruto tried to think of something else he could have said, not believing Sasuke would be around anyone. When he couldn't, he let out a small, genuine smile and spoke. Sure. You want to come, Haku-chan? He said cheerily. Haku smiled and nodded. She had an hour or two to waste before she had to get her apartment key anyway. The young shinobi decided to go somewhere rather familiar. Choji's favorite restaurant, Yakiniku Q. The genin walked in to find Team Asuma were already there. They were waved over by Asuma when he spotted them, so they decided they may as well join the group. Hey guys, said Choji Akamichi, the big-boned member of Team Asuma. Oh, it's you guys, how troublesome, said Shikamaru Nara, the lazy strategist of Team Asuma. Sasuke-kun, said Ino Yamanaka, the blonde fan girl of said team. Well, if it isn't Kakashi's team. You guys just come back from a mission? Asked Asuma Sarutobi, son of the Hokage. He heard they had gone on a C-ranked escort mission to Wave. Something about a bridge. Yeah, it was an escort mission. Sasuke said dryly, not wanting to allow Naruto the opportunity to give a very detailed recollection of the mission. Asuma raised an eyebrow at the blunt answer before continuing. Anything interesting happen? He said, knowing that Kakashi was in some sort of trouble from some Anbu that walked in earlier who he'd briefly overheard saying the Hokage was ranting on a masked, gravity-defying gray-haired Junin. This time Sasuke couldn't stop the exuberant blonde. You bet your something interesting happened. We ran into Zabuza Momochi. He said loudly. At this every shinobi in the restaurant dropped dead silent. Asuma was in a state of shock while his team was a little confused as to why that got such a large reaction out of their usually rather laid-back sensei. Zabuza Momochi. The demon of the mist. A-rank missing nin. He said, unable to hold back his surprise and skepticism. His team's eyes widened at this. Naruto's team took on an A-rank missing nin. The one and only, he said. Asuma blinked. And, he said, what do you mean? Naruto replied with confusion plastered across his face. Asuma sighed, remembering who he was dealing with. I mean, what happened? Did you beat him? Did your mission succeed or fail? You know, that kind of thing. He said. Sasuke sighed, tired of Naruto's long stories and the fact that he was starving wasn't helping. Long story short, we ran into the demon brothers, beat them, and then Zabuza showed up and got beaten by Kakashi. Then Haku here, he pointed at the girl, who was working with Zabuza at the time, saved his. He said, earning stares from all around to center on the girl. She shrunk slightly under their gazes, before she finished the story. After I saved Zabuza-sama he took a week to recover, then when we attacked again I was beaten by Naruto-kun and Kakashi killed Zabuza-sama. She said sadly. Then, seeing as I had nowhere to go and was no longer their enemy I came here to the Leaf. She concluded. The Hokage just let you in, said Shikamaru, earning a shake of the head from Haku. He took this as a sign that she was going to clear up the situation. The Hokage made me explain to him my reasons for coming here, my skill set and my loyalties. He concluded that I was safe to allow in the village under a few conditions. She said, earning a nod from Shikamaru. If the Hokage trusted the girl, he had no arguments. Sasuke, tiring of this conversation, decided to end it. If we're done I am rather hungry, he said with barely hidden irritation. Ino decided to try to woo him. She didn't quite get the message during their academy days. Oh, Sasuke-kun, you can share with me if you want, she said, tapping the free seat to her side. Sasuke simply rolled his eyes and sat next to Naruto, who had an end seat next to him. The idiot was the only person he could remotely stand, which was weird considering how loud the guy was. Oh, by the way, I'm Shikamaru Nara. The loud blonde girl is Ino Yamanaka and the guy at my right is Choji Akamaiki. Shikamaru said to Haku, who smiled somewhat nervously and replied, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Haku Yuki," she said, immediately drawing the attention of the Junin at the table. Yuki, as in the Yuki clan? Asuma asked, intrigued at the concept of the leaf gaining a new clan, with a Kekkei Genkai no less. Kekkei Genkai were game changers by nature, always an ace on the battlefield. Yes, I am the last known member of my clan. Zabuza-sama took me in at a young age and I've been traveling with him since then, she said glumly. Asuma looked at her sadly, knowing she was upset about this. Well, looks like you and Sasuke have plenty to talk about, muttered Shikamaru, though nobody heard him. Enough with all that, time to eat, Choji remarked loudly. The dinner was going nicely, everyone was having a good time. Sakura and Ino were obviously butting heads over Sasuke while he was being unsociable, but besides that everyone was chatting. Though Haku didn't have much experience with people and mainly chatted with Naruto. Ino had been mostly ignoring said girl in her little feud with Sakura, but eventually remembered she was there and decided to speak with her. So, Haku was it? She asked, receiving a nod. Are you interested in anyone? She asked. Haku didn't quite catch her drift, again not having a great deal of interaction with other people during her time with Zabuza. What do you mean, Ino? Ino blinked at this. What? You know, do you like any guys? Maybe Sasuke-kun. I mean, I wouldn't blame you, just look at him, she said, raising an eyebrow playfully and glancing at him. Haku thought about this for a second, before a certain blonde entered her mind. She blushed at this, still not really understanding why she was reacting like this. She had been around people. She didn't reveal her true gender to any of them, but she had been around plenty of people, so why was she reacting like this when she thought of the blonde? It must have been because he was precious to her. Yeah, that was it. I don't believe I have any interests at the moment, Ino, she said, making the girl sigh before going back to what she was doing. Haku, however, was still contemplating the question. She would have to properly think this over later. The dinner went by smoothly from this point on, both teams exchanging embarrassing tales of crappy D-rank missions that they'd been on since they graduated the academy and things that they had learned. When it came to what they had been taught by their Junin sensei, things began to get interesting again. So, what did you guys learn from Kakashi sensei? Asked Choji. Well, we've done teamwork exercises and the tree climbing exercise, and that's it, Naruto said regrettably. Asuma immediately cut in here, not believing his ears. You're joking. That's all he's taught you since you left the academy? He asked, receiving nods from Team 7. That's horrible. You are supposed to be taught physical conditioning and personal taijutsu styles right out of the academy. How could Kakashi let you go on a C-rank mission with nothing but tree climbing? He spoke, a little angry at his fellow elite Jonin. Actually, we learned that on the mission, Naruto corrected. Asuma's jaw dropped at this. What was Kakashi thinking? Was he trying to get these kids killed? Well, I bet my dad is gonna have fun with your sensei if that comes up, he said, sighing. He was going to have such a headache after all this. With all that cleared up, the dinner finally ended and everyone went on their way. Team Asuma went on their merry way while Team 7 decided to say goodnight to one another. See you guys tomorrows. I'll go with Haku to see Gigi, said Naruto with a grin. The other genin still couldn't believe how he spoke about the Hokage, the strongest person in the village, but they resolved to question it another time. Yeah, see you Dobi, Sakura, Haku, Sasuke said before walking off. Sakura looked his way before speaking quickly to the other two. CYA Naruto. CYA Haku, she said before running after Sasuke and shouting. Sasuke-kun, wait. I'll walk with you. Sasuke started running at this while Naruto and Haku's sweat dropped before walking toward the Hokage tower. So Haku, Naruto started, getting the girl's attention. What do you think about Konoha so far? Do you like it? He said with a somewhat neutral expression. He hoped she liked it here. She smiled at him warmly. Yes, it's lovely. I can tell that I'll be happy here. Maybe one day I can restart my clan here. She mused absently before looking at Naruto and blushing a deep crimson. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. Girls are weird, first Hinata and now Haku. I'm sure they are fine. He thought to himself as they continued in silence. However, soon the innocence of the situation would be ruined. As they were walking through the market district, Haku noticed people were avoiding them and starting. She focused her senses and was shocked by what she heard. Look, there's the demon brat. Why is he even still here? The village would be better without him. Why can't he just disappear? All these things and more were being whispered in their direction, and she looked at Naruto. What she saw nearly broke her heart. While his expression still seemed normal, his eyes were showing that he was in turmoil. His heart was being shattered as he just walked and did nothing to protect himself. She couldn't contain her anger and dragged him into a nearby alley so that she could get away from the stares, glares and hateful comments. Naruto-kun, what the hell was that about? She all but shouted, why are they being so cruel to you? He sighed and lowered his head. I can't tell you, Haku-chan. I don't want you to hate me. He spoke with rare sadness in his voice. Haku actually seemed to get more angry at this. Why would I hate you? Do you not trust me to believe in you? Do you think I'm some horrible person who would just toss you aside for the smallest of things? She said. No. He answered quickly. But it's a pretty big deal and I don't want it to come between us. He said. Is it your fault? She said. Well, no, but, he said. Did you ask for whatever it is? No, it's just. Have you ever done anything against this village? Well, I did a lot of pranks. Then as far as I'm concerned, you are as much a victim as I was as a child. She spoke confidently. Really? He said softly. Would she really not care? Would she accept me? No, she thinks she will, but once she find out what it is, she'll just be scared of me and avoid me. Yes, Naruto-kun, I really do, she said comfortingly, grabbing his hand and smiling at him. Well, could you give me some time to think about it, please? He said. Of course, Naruto-kun, but you will tell me, understood? She said playfully. Naruto regained his smile at his and looked right at her. Yes, ma'am, he said exuberantly. Good, she concluded. They left the alley and resumed their walk to the Hokage Tower, though this time they decided to walk a little faster to avoid as many people as they could. Naruto was still hurt by the comments and stares, but he seemed happier after their talk. Maybe she won't care. Maybe she'll accept me, he thought with a smile. It made him wonder though, why did her friendship matter so much so him? The idea of her leaving him made him physically sick. He'd figure out in future, he thought to himself. Back at the Hokage Tower. While Haku and Naruto were about to walk into the Hokage office, Kakashi emerged from the office looking like he'd just figured out his books were burnt. He looked at them before lowering his head and shuffling slowly back home. The question is, why not Shunshin? Why'd a ninja walk anywhere? Naruto was cut out of his musings by Haku waving in front of his face. He blinked quickly before smiling and following her inside the office. Upon entering, the Hokage looked rather angry before resettling his face into a neutral expression upon seeing them. Ah, Haku-chan, Naruto-kun, he said while raising from his desk and walking around to them. Here's the key to your apartment. It's in the west district of the village in a blue-painted apartment complex, 3rd floor, room 56. He said, handing her a key. She smiled at the elder Kage before giving him a quick thank you. Now, as I said, you'll be with Team 7 for the next month, but you won't be doing missions during this time. As such, you will receive an allowance from myself until you are free to do missions. It should cover your daily expenses. If you need anything, I'm here most of the time, he said with a grandfatherly smile. Thank you, Hokage-sama, you are very generous, she said professionally, to which Naruto shook his head. Why did everyone act so professional around him? He was just an old closet pervert. Now then, I'll get back to my. He looked at his desk where the paperwork pile had seemingly grown since he stood up. Paperwork, he said through clenched teeth. Haku let out a small giggle at this, to which Naruto raised an eyebrow at. This caused her to blush and turn away. Seems Naruto has quite the effect on our newest kunoichi, interesting. The elderly Hokage mused. Still, he needs to wear something a little more desirable if he really wants to get any positive attention. He thought, slightly irritated. Naruto's outfit was, in a word, disgusting. It was an eyesore in all meanings of the word. Hi, Hokage-sama, sure think Gigi. They replied, before turning and walking out the door. I really should be a little more concerned about letting him call me that in public. It's not like I really care, I like that little knucklehead. He thought before going back to his paperwork. Which has again seemed to multiply. Where is this all coming from? He said before looking at Minato's portrait. How did you do it? He shouted, making all the shadows in the room groan and sweat drop. Hey, I don't pay you to judge me. He said before grumbling about stupid blonde geniuses and going back to work. At Haku's apartment, after about 10 to 15 minutes of searching, they managed to find Haku's new apartment. It was nice enough, with a kitchen, bathroom, living room and a free room for personal use. It was pretty spacious, at least compared to Naruto's apartment, and had already been furnished well enough. The wallpaper is a cyan blue with the occasion ripple pattern in yellow. There was a table in the middle of the room with some coasters and a flower pot with a few lilies in the middle of the table. There was a bookshelf with a couple of books about chakra control exercises and the history of the shinobi world and the Leaf Village in specific. There are a few basic wooden seats around the table and some painting on the wall showing the Leaf Village and other noteworthy places. There was also a porch with a double-windowed door facing towards the village. The bedroom had a wardrobe, with some kunoichi-suited clothing in there, a chest of drawers, a single bed with a flower-patterned blanket. There was also a chest under the bed for item storage along with a bedside table. There was a window above the bed showing the garden behind the apartment complex. The kitchen had everything you'd expect, an oven, fridge, freezer, a sink, etc. It had a counter for preparing meals along with some cupboards for food storage. It had two windows on one side of the room showing the Leaf Village in its full glory and one on the right showing the forest outside the leaf. All in all, it was a pretty nice place. This is a really nice place, Haku-chan, maybe I should ask for a temporary house. He said offhandedly. He'd forgotten that she'd seen the way he was treated and so she knew what he meant with little effort. What's your apartment like? Is it bad? She asked, a little afraid for the answer. Naruto inwardly cursed for bringing the topic up. He sighed and continued. It's not awful, but it's not great either. It's livable, I guess. He said casually, obviously having come to terms with his conditions. All right then, she said sadly. I guess I should be going then. See you tomorrow, Haku-chan. He said with a smile, waiting for her answer before turning to leave. I guess so. See you at training, Naruto-kun. She said, giving him a small hug, not finding it weird in the slightest. He smiled and walked out. She went through some of her books for the next hour or so before she found a book that interested her. She found a book labeled, The Rise and Fall of Uzushiogakure. After reading through the whole thing, she had one thought on her mind. Uzumaki clan. With Naruto at his apartment. Naruto lay on his bed and let out a huge sigh. The day had been quite long, and not to mention Haku figuring out about his treatment already. He decided to ignore it and walked to his kitchen but found something interesting. A message and what looked like a slip of paper. Hey Naruto, I got a bit of advice from the Hokage about the way I train you, so I got you this. It's called chakra paper. If you channel your chakra into it, one of 5 things will happen depending on your elemental nature affinity. Your affinity determines what elements you will be best at using. If you have a fire affinity, the paper will ignite and turn to ash. If you have a wind affinity, the paper will split in two. If you have a lightning affinity, the paper will wrinkle. If you have an earth affinity, the paper will turn to stone and crumble away, and if you have a water affinity, the paper will become wet or damp. From Kakashi. See you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Huh, that's cool, he said and picked up the chakra paper. He channeled chakra into it for a few seconds before it split in two. However, it was what happened next that confused him. Instead of crumbling away, it turned to stone and began to sparkle in small places. What could it mean? Training and revelations. Naruto and Haku were both rather confused at the moment. Both had discovered something they were not intending or ever expecting. Haku had discovered the lovable blonde idiot that she had been around for a while now was part of a clan. Not just some normal clan either, they were essentially on par with the Senju since they literally built their own village. She was rather saddened by the fact that it was stated that the clan was wiped out, however, but that led her to think about something. Did the blonde even know what his name meant? She had no way of knowing without asking, and since he had no family, it was uncertain if he was told. There was an unspoken rule that clans' names belonging to clans the size and importance of the Uzumaki were not ever to be given to one who is not of said clan, so the blonde was definitely related to the Uzumakis. The more she thought about it, the more confused she got. It did explain one thing though, why he was able to churn out so many damn clones. The Uzumaki life force and chakra was apparently quite legendary. Makes sense considering they were an offshoot of the Senju clan. She felt the beginning of a headache and decided to leave it there for now. She would ask said blonde tomorrow. Naruto, however, was trying to decipher what the strange reaction the chakra paper had meant. Kakashi said if the paper turned to stone and crumbled that you had an earth affinity. However, he didn't say anything about it turning to stone and sparkling. Maybe he was special. Yeah, right, he thought. I'm just some clan-less orphan, what would be special about me? I would be told if I had some secret ability, right? He continued to himself. The thought wouldn't go away though. Gigi did say I was born on the day of the Kyuubi attack. Maybe my parents were special, but he doesn't know who they were. He thought. He continued thinking about this before getting bored and giving up. I'll tell Kakashi sensei tomorrow, maybe he has some more chakra paper. He said to no one. Then he crawled into bed and decided to sleep the day off. If there was one thing good about any day, it was sleep. Beautifully simple yet so enjoyable. Yep, sleep was great. Next day, Naruto rose from his bed feeling much better, the night having washed away his anxiety. His mind hadn't stopped pondering the chakra paper though, and then there was the fact that he'd have to tell Haku his secret at some point. He sighed, wondering how he got into this mess. He was about to have a quick breakfast when he heard a knock on his porch window. He looked over to see his teacher, Kakashi Hatake, just standing there. Like a scarecrow. A creepy one-eyed scarecrow. He walked over to the door, unlocked it and let him in. What's up, sensei? He said, somewhat bored. He was up, wasn't he? It's not like he was late for training. Wait, was he? He checked his lock. 5:25, I still have plenty of time. He thought idly before turning back to his teacher. Oh, nothing important, Naruto, just wanted to bring you this. He said, holding out an assortment of random, healthy foods. Naruto blanched before sighing. He was sighing a lot since the wave mission, must be stress. I assume you want me to eat healthier, right, sensei? He said, getting a nod in return. Damn it. Fine. I'll eat your stupid fruits and vegetables. He continued, walking towards his table to start preparing his breakfast. Kakashi simply smiled at how easy his genin were to control. Is that all, or do you want something else, sensei? Naruto called over to him, without turning from his breakfast. He couldn't waste time now, could he? I was wondering if you got my other little gift. He said, earning a nod from Naruto before he realized this was the best way to bring this up. Yeah, I did. Something weird happened when I used it. He said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at this. He was wondering what could have happened. Maybe he had a strong affinity for wind like his father, since Kakashi knew his parents rather well. He'd never tell the blonde without permission, of course, but he thought of himself like an older brother to the kid. Oh really? What happened? You have a strong affinity for something? He said casually, not wanting to give anything away. Naruto shrugged and looked at his ceiling, as though in deep thought. Well, I'm not really sure. The paper cut in half which shows I have a wind affinity, but it was another thing which confused me. It wasn't on your list at all. Well, it was half on the list, I guess. He said. Kakashi was growing increasingly interested at this. Did the blonde have a gift? Show me, he said seriously, holding out another piece of chakra paper. Just do what you did yesterday, I'll tell you what it mean. He continued. If I can, that is. He mused. Naruto grabbed the chakra paper and began to concentrate. Like he said, it split in two. And just like he said, it did something rather interesting. It turned to stone and began to sparkle in the light. Amazing, thought Kakashi. I have no idea what this means, I've never seen that before, maybe he has a very strong earth affinity. It's as much my guess as anyone else's. He concluded. Noticing the blonde's attention was on him, he decided to make an excuse for now. Well, Naruto, it appears as if you have a very powerful earth affinity. That's very good, as you have the most defensive element along with the most offensive. He said cheerily. However, he wasn't sure if that was the extent of the story. Well, anyway, I'll see you at training. Yane, he said before using the shunshin to leave. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the sudden exit. Oh well, he'd see him in half an hour anyway. After eating, a quick shower and getting dressed, he picked up his equipment and headed to the usual training ground. He groaned, like he was actually going to learn anything. Then again, he did test their affinities, maybe he was planning to teach them some kick-jutsu. He scoffed. Yeah right. At Training Ground 7, the majority of Team 7 besides Naruto was already at the training ground. Sasuke was first there, since he had no hobby and was generally a hard, followed by Haku, who knew the importance of punctuality, and then Sakura. The group saw a small blonde blur in the distance and knew who it was. Hey guys. Good morning, he said to them after coming to a stop with a small smile. Haku noticed he seemed a little off. More serious than usual. Maybe he'd discovered something important since last night. So, what are your affinities, guys? He asked happily. Sasuke grunted before saying, lightning, small fire. He wasn't really happy about this. Uchiha were primarily Kaden users. He'd already gotten his anger out the last night though, so he could at least keep up his oh so important air of indifference. Sakura smiled and said, I got water. I think it suits me pretty well, not like those dangerous ones or messy like earth. She finished. Everyone's sweat dropped at this. She was a kunoichi for Kami's sake. Naruto sighed before continuing. Cool, I got wind and a strong earth. He said. The word, strong, caught everyone's attention. How did he know if it was strong or not? What do you mean strong, Dobi? Sasuke said, actually interested in what he said. Naruto just smiled and replied. Well, Kakashi-sensei gave us that list of what the affinities looked like on the paper, right? He said, earning nods. Well, my earth affinity did something different than the list said, and Kakashi-sensei came to my house this morning, so I just asked him what it meant. He finished. The genin were quite surprised by this, but none more so than Haku. Chakra paper isn't supposed to do unique things unless there are special circumstances involved. My first use of it made it freeze, because of my Kekkei Genkei. What did his do? She thought, squinting her eyes at him. Naruto-kun, what did your chakra paper do? She asked. He looked at her and answered casually. Well, it was supposed to turn to stone and crumble, but mine turned to stone and started to sparkle in certain places. He answered. Haku raised an eyebrow at this. That didn't seem like a strong affinity. That reminds me, I need to talk to him about the Uzumaki clan later. She thought passively. Alright, that's enough of that. The genin turned around to see Kakashi standing atop a post. Naruto smiled up at him while Sakura was about to scream at him about his lateness. Before realizing he wasn't late. Kakashi-sensei, you're on time. She said, shocked by the fact that he was capable of being on time even remotely. Yes, well, I decided that we needed to be a bit more serious about your training, so here I am. He said. And the Sandaime threatened to outlaw Ika if I didn't, he thought. Then he decided to continue. We are going to be doing physical conditioning and speed training for now. It became clear to me in Wave that you aren't all in shape to do your jobs effectively. Also, I will be evaluating your taijutsu styles to see if you are using them correctly or if they aren't suited to you. He said, earning nods. Haku, Sasuke, you two are already rather fast, so we will be working on your strength and taijutsu. He said, earning more nods. Naruto, you need to improve your speed and your taijutsu since I couldn't help but notice you don't really have any sort of style befitting a shinobi. He continued. Naruto decided to be clear what he meant by this. What do you mean, sensei? My taijutsu seems fine, he said indignantly. Kakashi chuckled at this. The boy was so easy to rile up. What I mean, Naruto, is you swing your fists like a brawler. Ninja don't just use their hands, you must attune your whole body to the fight. You must be able to hit hard but also correct yourself quickly if you miss. I've noticed you just throw all your weight into your blows and hope they connect, and if they don't, you leave yourself wide open. We also need to work on your blocking, dodging, and parrying. He said, as if reading from a textbook. Then he noticed Naruto was sitting on the ground with a storm cloud over his head and laughed. Lastly, Sakura, you need just about everything, he said casually. The girl face faulted at this, but realized he wasn't wrong. She has done barely any training at all. She just sighed and nodded. Haku, Sasuke, you two will be wearing weights and going through taijutsu katas to increase your familiarity with them while also boosting your muscle mass. He said. Then he turned to Naruto. Naruto, you will also be wearing weights, but you will be doing laps of the clearing and then you will come to me so we can work on finding you a taijutsu style. He said. Then he turned to the pink-haired member of the team. Lastly, Sakura, you will be doing all these things. However, you will be doing less of each and we'll work on rounding you out more before specializing you a bit more. He said calmly, earning a groan. Well then, let's get to it. He said happily. 2 weeks later. The training was, to put it simply, hell. Kakashi was a hell of a slave driver. They couldn't argue with the results though. They were already starting to see some improvements. Naruto was getting faster and with his indomitable stamina he could keep going for a long time. Sasuke and Haku were getting more precise with their taijutsu styles and seemed stronger. Sakura was getting better all around. Kakashi managed to find a taijutsu style that served Naruto rather well. It focused on using feints and various distractions to land blows on the more vulnerable areas the enemy's body. By working on pranks all his life, Naruto was a natural genius when it came to coming up with distractions and using feints. Hell, he managed to hit Kakashi a few times. Sakura was a different case. Kakashi decided strength training may not actually be necessary for her if she could master chakra-infused taijutsu, which he was certain she could with her chakra control. Then he managed to find her a quick and precise style that blended well with this, as a quick chakra-infused punch on an important area could end the fight immediately. Now that Sasuke had awakened his Sharingan, he was finding the Uchiha taijutsu style to be leagues better than before, since it was intended to be used with the Sharingan to begin with. He was now capable of accurately keep up with enemy strikes and calculate where to dodge, block, parry effectively. He decided to work on speed and reaction time in his free time since just seeing an attack didn't mean he could block it. Haku needed a lot of work on her taijutsu, having specialized in ninjutsu and hand sign speed, along with precise use of Senbon. The girl was using a style similar to Sakura, one that required a lot of speed with the bare minimum amount of strength. She decided to use her knowledge of pressure points in the human body in her taijutsu. This allowed her to paralyze and disable limbs with so much as a touch. All in all, it was a rather productive couple of weeks. Kakashi was wondering why he waited so long to start teaching them. It was so much fun to see them fall and complain. Alright, my cute little genin, that's enough for today. I'm very proud of your progress, but don't get upset if you think you are progressing too slow. Physical conditioning takes a long time to master. Don't expect to advance too quickly, he said with a smile. All the genin just grumbled about stupid slave-driving senseis. Well, I'll see you all here tomorrow same time, okay? Bye, he said before using a leaf shunshin to go wherever he goes in his off hours. The genin all sighed and wordlessly walked away. Sasuke with Sakura, by with I mean followed by, and Naruto with Haku. Hey Naruto-kun, the ice user said, could you come to my apartment with me? I need to talk to you about something. She said nervously. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this but just went with it. He was far too tired to argue. Sure, he said tiredly. They then walked in silence. Haku was silent because she was wondering how he'd react to the news, and Naruto was silent because he was worried about what she wanted to talk about. Maybe she'd make him spill the beans about Kyuubi. Oh well, too late to run away now. Not that he could run any time soon. At Haku's apartment. After a rather uncomfortably silent walk, the duo arrived at Haku's apartment. She promptly let them in before ushering him to take a seat at her table. They were silent for a while until Haku could find a way to ease into the topic. She found a way, and went with it. So tell me, Naruto-kun, how much do you know about your surname? She asked cryptically. Naruto was confused by the way she phrased the question but replied regardless. Nothing, I guess. It was given to me by Gigi because he didn't know who my parents were. Or so he says, he said, keeping the last part under his breath. Haku sighed. This was going to take a while. He didn't know the slightest thing. What if I told you that the Uzumaki were the founding clan of Uzushiogakure? The village of longevity, as it's so called. She said softly, knowing his world was going to be turned upside down by this revelation. Well, I'd say, he said, before realizing what she said. What? He shouted. Haku foresaw this reaction and simply handed him the book she learned all this from. He looked at the cover for a moment before reading it. Once he started reading about his clan, he was ecstatic. He wasn't just a nobody, he was a part of a clan. Alas, it was not the end of the book. Once he'd finished, he looked heartbroken. His clan was destroyed before he even learned who they were. It said nothing about survivors. For all he knew, he was the last of his clan. I had a clan, and they are all gone, he said, his voice breaking. He started to tear up when Haku raised from her seat and began to comfort him. It's all right, Naruto-kun. I know exactly how you feel. I know, it'll be okay. She spoke softly, allowing him to cry on her shoulder. We have so much in common, don't we? It's like fate that we met, even under the circumstances we did. She thought happily. He was the first person to accept her besides Zabuza, and they were the same. That small thought comforted her more than she could believe. They could always relate to one another. Once he'd stopped crying, he didn't break their embrace. No, despite everything, he actually deepened it. This surprised the girl, but for whatever reason she couldn't break it either. It was warm. It made her happy just being like this. She couldn't help but wonder why she enjoyed this so much, why the blonde had such an effect on her. After a few minutes they finally separated and blushed equal shades of crimson and turning away. Haku simply placed her fist in front of her mouth while Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Haku decided to ease the awkwardness. So what do you plan to do about this? She said. Naruto blinked, before realizing what she was referring to. I guess I'll go see Gigi about it sometime, but I don't know why he'd keep this from me. He knows how much I've wanted to learn about my parents, he said sadly before Haku got a shot in. She couldn't let him blame the man before he'd even asked. Maybe he had a good reason. Remember, the book said your clan was destroyed for their rising power. Maybe he didn't tell you so you wouldn't spread the information around. She said with a hint of certainty. Naruto just sighed. Yeah, I guess you're right. I'll go talk to him tomorrow, he said. Haku smiled at this, happy she could ease his tension. Then she had a thought. Naruto, have you ever thought about trying to raise your intelligence? She said professionally, trying not to actually call him stupid. Naruto furrowed his brow at this. He wasn't that stupid, was he? Not really. Why? He said neutrally. Well, I was just thinking. Zabuza-sama once told me the greatest weapon for a ninja is his mind. You could have 1,000 jutsu, but without the intelligence to use them correctly you would just be wasting your time. For example, when we fought on the bridge you ran straight into my mirrors without even thinking. You may have been more help outside them, she said, obviously daring him to doubt her statement. He couldn't, obviously. I guess I can't argue with that, can I? He said with a pout. Haku giggled at this, he looked so cute when he did that. Funny. That's what she meant. Not cute, funny, yeah. While you're at it you may as well change your outfit too. Orange is not a ninja's color, she said with a playful grin, knowing he'd complain this time. Naruto's jaw dropped. Why? Why was everyone so against orange? What? Orange is the perfect color, he bellowed. She laughed at that. His reactions were really comedy gold. Her laugh is so nice, he thought absently. If you say so, but would it really hurt to get something a bit more suited to the profession? You could get a mask too. Speaking of which, I need a new one thanks to a certain someone, she said with a smirk. Naruto huffed at this. He didn't make her attack him. He didn't exactly have a choice. Fine, Mom, he said sarcastically. Haku just looked irritated at this. Naruto began to sweat and put up his hands disarmingly. Well, to be honest, most shops won't serve me, he said, knowing that she'd probably ask him about you know what. Oh, I see, she said. Well, in that case why don't I help you shop? Or better yet you could use a henge or something, she said. Naruto blinked, again, and again. I am such an idiot, he said to himself. She just let out a snort of amusement at this. He wasn't wrong. Well, we can start working on that right now, can't we? I have plenty of books thanks to the Hokage. Read some now, or borrow them and give 'em back when you're done, she said. Naruto grinned at this. She was a kind person. Sure thing, Haku-chan, he said with an honest smile. This in turn made the girl blush. He sighed and went over to her bookcase, taking out a basic chakra introductory book. He started reading it while Haku helped him with certain things he couldn't understand. Eventually they both fell asleep, the day catching up with them, but one couldn't miss the happy expressions they fell asleep with. Outside Haku's apartment, after the duo just entered, a certain girl with shoulder-length blue hair and pupil-less white eyes with a touch of lavender watched as the source of her obsession and a girl she did not recognize entered the apartment complex. She gripped the pole she was next to hard, anger evident in her eyes. That bitch, she thought. Little did anyone know, but that girl was going to be a very different person soon enough. She then stormed off back to the Hyuga compound to take out her frustrations on something. Maybe her sister wanted another spar. Well, this time she wouldn't hold back. Little did Naruto know, but he'd changes the girl for worse. That girl was named Hinata Hyuga, heiress of the Hyuga clan, and it was time for her to stop playing around. A month later, 2 weeks passed and Team 7 continued to train until they couldn't and then some. The results were becoming readily apparent to outsides. Thanks to his physical training and healthier diet, Naruto started to grow a little. He was maybe an inch or two higher than before. His body was beginning to look more muscular, more slim and fit. As much as could come out of a couple of weeks of tour. I mean, training anyway. Haku was noticeably better at taijutsu. Her style was beginning to become natural to her, testing it in spars against the others. So far the only one she could beat was Sakura. Against Naruto they were about even, and Sasuke rarely lost at taijutsu, the Uchiha style and the Sharingan making him far too difficult to defeat. She also began to form a more attractive figure. Now there was no doubt to her gender, even if there was little doubt before. Sakura was beginning to show skill as a kunoichi. There were obviously a lot of kinks to work out, but now she was finally beginning to become a respectable genin. Kakashi convinced her to stop dieting and to eat more nutritiously. This, along with her physical training, meant she was now far more energetic than before. She was developing more attractively as well, but alas, the forehead was still there. Sasuke. Well, he was already the best out the bunch, physically at least. Haku was the best all-rounded, but even so he was showing improvement. His taijutsu style was now second nature to him, and his strength and speed training were helping to keep up with the enemy's blows rather well. He had already been eating healthily and training well, so he stayed mostly the same over the period of time. Obviously muscles became more apparent, but that was about it. After a while of ranting from Haku, Naruto finally got a new outfit. It consisted of a mesh armor shirt, a black jacket with a high collar and an orange inside. He couldn't go without orange completely. Dark blue Anbu style trousers, pants for those so inclined, fingerless black gloves and some black sandals. All in all, it was a much better look for him. Now Haku couldn't look at him without blushing, his figure no longer hidden. He was getting awfully confused about that. To be fair though, he was taking notice of her too, but despite the fact he'd been improving his mind over the last 2 weeks, he was still pretty clueless about the female population. Speaking of which, his intellect was improving at an astonishing rate. It made Haku question if he had ever been taught anything, ever. He was like a natural genius, easily soaking up anything. Little did she know he inherited that little detail from his father. Speaking of parents, that brings us back to a small chat with the Sandame. Exclamation mark. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto walked into the Hokage tower alone. He didn't want Haku around for this, knowing he was very likely to get very upset. This was a week after their chat, as he had been busy training from that point until now. His matured mind would help him a lot in this matter. He'd still call him Gigi though, you can't just train that out. He walked into the old office and, surprisingly enough, there was no paperwork. Funny how since he stopped pulling pranks the paperwork started to decline. Yes, funny. Not in any way because his pranks caused the paperwork. Nope. Gigi. He spoke calmly. The man raised an eyebrow before raising the other and dropping his jaw for good measure. The boy looked completely different, more muscle, new clothes, he was even a little taller. Hell, even his eyes looked a little different, showing a more trained mind. Yes, Naruto-kun, he said, trying to control himself. What can I do for you, my boy? He continued. Now that he was over his shock, he was thrilled. The boy looked like a true shinobi. Obviously he'd found a good influence. Oh, nothing special. I'd just like to ask you about Uzushiogakure. He said with sarcasm dripping from his mouth, and then obvious anger as he spoke of his ancestors' village. The Hokage widened his eyes at this. How did he know? I guess you found out then. About your lineage, he said, earning a slight snort. Well then I suppose I can't lie any longer. Yes, you are a member of the Uzumaki clan and your mother was also a member. He said seriously. Why wasn't I told? He spoke angrily. The Hokage sighed and continued. Because the enemies of the Uzumaki clan still exist. If the world found out about your lineage, you may have been kidnapped. Like Kumo tried to do to your mother. Kushina Uzumaki. He said seriously, silently patting himself on the back for such a good excuse. The lie was more to do with his father than anything. The boy calmed down a little at his. Guess I should have listened to Haku, he did have a good excuse. Is it just that though? An excuse. Ah, I can get that information easily. He thought with a grin. Oh, and my father, he said, barely containing his smug expression. The Hokage just blinked at this. He'd been found out, by Naruto. He was so different from a week ago. Damn, whoever convinced him to study. I can't tell you about him, Naruto-kun, he said nervously. The boy rolled his eyes. Hiruzen continued. However, I can give you all the things regarding your mother and her possessions, if you'd like. He said, smiling. I'll get him with this deal, he thought. Naruto inwardly cursed. He couldn't turn that down. Fine, Gigi, that'll be fine, he said grudgingly. Hiruzen did an internal dance at a well-executed plan. I'll have them sent to your apartment, he said before Naruto nodded and left. Man, that was close. I'm Minato, thought the elderly Hokage. Exclamation mark. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. Back to the present. Team 7 were standing at Training Ground 7 with their sensei, Kakashi, waiting for him to tell them what they'd be doing for the day. Now then, Team 7, first I'd like to say that I'm very impressed with your recent progress, and I don't bet you could take on most new Chunin, he said happily. Everyone, even Sasuke, who had started to lighten up since the wave mission, smiled at this proclamation. Now then, today we will finally be working on your affinities. Here's what will happen. Sasuke, you will work on your lightning affinity. Naruto, you will work on earth. Sakura and Haku will work on water. Understood, he said, getting a hi from the group. All right then. Then let's get situated, yes, he said, before moving them away from one another. Well, Haku and Sakura stayed together for obvious reasons. He then gave them their tasks. The girls were to float water over their heads and down to the ground before they had mastered the first test. Naruto was to crush a stone in under 5 seconds with nothing but chakra, and Sasuke was to dance lightning around his hand without shocking himself. Kakashi expected this to take a while. Surprisingly, Haku was doing rather well, though she had experience in Suidan ninjutsu already. Sasuke was doing okay. Sakura was doing well because of her perfect chakra control. It was Naruto who surprised the man. Well, he'd stopped being surprised since last week, but it was still a sight to see. Naruto was already able to half-crush the rock in about 15 seconds. That was rather incredible. He was wondering if that was the natural talent the blonde had been hiding until recently, or whether that was due to his rare earth affinity. He'd never know. Still, it was gratifying to see his students doing so well. Naruto created a single clone while no one was looking and made it do the exercise also. He had learned about the memory feedback while reading through a scroll of clone varieties. He couldn't risk using many, as the feedback on his immature mind was far greater than it would be on someone older than him. He didn't want to kill off the brain cells he'd just gotten. After a few hours of this, he'd reduced the time to 12 seconds to half crush it and 19 seconds for it to be fully crushed. And it'll be lower when I dispel my clone, he mused. This continued for a while. Haku managed to fully master the first exercise due to her experience and chakra control. Sakura was about 3/5 of the way there, and Sasuke could keep the lightning around his hand for about 18 seconds before he shocked himself. Naruto, after dispelling his clone, found he could do the whole rock in 5 seconds. He smiled at this and told Kakashi about it. Safe to say that was unexpected, but he was impressed nonetheless. At the end of the day, Kakashi spoke to them. All right, Naruto and Haku have mastered the first exercise, so I will teach Naruto some basic Doden ninjutsu tomorrow, while Haku will learn some Suidan ninjutsu. Sasuke, Sakura, once you complete the exercises, we will do the same for you. Now, dismissed, he said before he shunshined away. Man, I need to learn that. Hey Haku-chan. You used the shunshin to escape with Zabuza, right? Spoke Naruto. Haku nodded and knew what he was going to say, so she decided to speak before he could. Yes, and I'd be more than happy to teach you it, she said with a smile, which again caused Naruto to smile back. Thanks a lot, Haku-chan, it would really be a lifesaver. I'm tired of using my feet, you know, he said somewhat playfully. Haku laughed at this and just nodded before continuing. Now then, the only sign to the shunshin is the ram sign, then picture your destination and, she said as she shunshined behind him. Quote dot dot dot. You're there, she said happily. Naruto smiled and focused. Well then, see you tomorrow, Haku-chan. He said. She returned the gesture before he used his own shunshin to go home. However, the effect surprised Haku. Instead of leaves or smoke in this wake. Dot dot dot. There were small pink gems. The next day, as the group were gathered in Training Ground 7, Kakashi once again split them up. He went to Naruto and waited a moment for the boy to ready himself before speaking. All right, Naruto, I have 2 Doden Jutsu to show you. Once you get the first down, I'll show you the second. Understood, he said, earning a nod and a small smirk. Finally, Jutsu. The boy thought. No matter the rays of intelligence, he was still an energetic kid. All right, the first jutsu is called Doden, Doryuso, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears. It will create stone spikes from the ground to impale your opponents. The only seal is bird, so have fun. He said before he shunshined to Haku. Hey Haku, like I said to Naruto, I will teach you 2 basic jutsu. Master the first and I'll give you the second. Understood, he said, earning a nod. All right, the first technique is Sweden, Mizoripa, water release, water trumpet. The signs are dragon, tiger and hare. So, knock yourself out. He said before he shunshined to a high branch to read his perverted books. By the end of the week, Naruto and Haku had mostly gotten the techniques down while Sakura and Sasuke finished their elemental chakra manipulation exercises. Sasuke was given the Raiden, Kangekiha lightning release, wave of inspiration to learn, and Sakura was given the same jutsu as Haku. A few days later, the 4 genin had all learned their 2 elemental jutsu after a few days. Once Naruto mastered his first, he was given the Doden, Doryuheki Earth Release, Earth Style Wall to learn, which surprised him given that it was a B-ranked jutsu. Haku and Sakura were given the Sweden, Sujinheki Water Release, Water Formation Wall, another B-ranked jutsu. Sasuke was given the Raiju Hashiri no Jutsu, Lightning Beast running technique. The genin were all rather happy with their new jutsu. Sasuke had no defensive jutsu since lightning wasn't exactly a defensive element. Unfortunately for a certain Hyoten user, the team was about to receive a mission. This meant she would be alone for a little while. Maybe she could go find Team Asuma and do something with them. At the Hokage Tower, the team entered the mission assignment chamber to find Iruka sitting at the desk. He hadn't really seen